All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, Kathleen, you can go ahead and start their meeting.
Okay, hello, everyone. Yes, we are here for the Transportation and Circulation Committee for October 22nd, and we're getting started. So first, I think we need to look at some minutes from the past meeting for approval. Is that correct? Oh, no, we have to take roll call first. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'll take roll call.
Thank you.
Hillary Blackerby. Here. Committee Member Horn. Committee Member Horn. If you could unmute yourself. Committee Member Sanford.
Just open.
Present.
Okay, I'm Susan. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'm not listed in as being here, so I just want you to know.
We got you. Thank you. Andres
Okay.
Villalobos.
Present.
David Collum.
Present.
David Hodges is excused. And Chair Kathleen Rodriguez.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, Chair Rodriguez, you could go ahead and prompt for public comment on items not on the agenda today.
Yeah, are there any requests for public comment on miscellaneous items? Not.
Chair Rodriguez, I see two members here under attendees. I would just ask the attendees if you would like to speak during public comment to please raise the hand icon to speak. Otherwise, if you are just listening or want to speak under a future agenda item, then you would raise your hand at that time. Madam Chair, I don't see anybody raising their hand at this time.
Very good. Then I'd like to move to the approval of the minutes from June 25th. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
Could I say a comment?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Just
Yes.
that Barry Remus is mentioned a couple times, and I think his name is spelled wrong each time. He's here, so I think it's just a minor note. It's not REMUS, I don't think. I think it's IS. Not sure.
It is,
Thank you.
we'll correct that.
Thank you. I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second was, who seconded? Hillary? Oh, okay.
Hillary.
Well, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'll need to take a roll call for the approval of the minutes.
Sure, go ahead.
Committee Member Blackerby.
Aye.
And Ms. Jackson, if you just hold on, if anyone is speaking, they need to turn on their cameras to speak. So if you want to be counted, then bring your camera up and your mic, not just your mic. Thank you.
Hey, Susan Horn.
Aye.
Eve Sanford.
Aye.
Andres Villalobos.
Aye.
David Collum,
Aye.
and Chair Rodriguez.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair Rodriguez, do you have any announcements? I know that I have one, but is there any announcements that you would like, Chair Rodriguez?
I don't have any unless another member does. Thank you.
Okay, not hearing any from the committee members. I did want to make an announcement. David Hodges is not attending tonight's meeting, but I did want to say that this would have been his last meeting for the year, and then he's officially termed out. And I just, we all wanted to thank him for his service and and just his time that he spent these past 4 years. He's been able to comment and provide feedback on a lot of exciting active transportation programs, projects, and as well as see Vision Zero begin and the whole process. And we just, again, thank him for his time.
Absolutely. He'll be missed.
Thanks, David.
I think if there's anything for the subcommittee reports, if not, then we can go on to the first scheduled item of the night.
Yes, well, shall we go ahead and start with, this is very exciting. The visioning of future downtown State Street. This is a wonderful topic.
Yes. Okay, with this project, we will be having Jason Harris, our city's economic development director, and Rob Dayton, our transportation manager, provide this presentation.
Hello, Madam Chair, fellow committee members. My name is Jason Harris, City's Economic Development Manager. I'll be kind of making introductory comments, and I'll be quickly. I recognize you all have a full agenda tonight. We're here to present a visioning kind of focus group, as you could call it, for the future of State Street. Next slide, please. And why we are here today. So as we're all aware, we're living under a pandemic. The stay-at-home order was issued by the governor in mid-March, March 19th exactly, cut down, terminated all business activity, closed all business activity, all essential other than essential services. We have all cultural, academic activities also closed during that time period. We really struggled as a local economy. Our revenues completely dropped. Businesses were struggling mightily, not having any activity for 2 full months. The city responded with the adoption of an emergency economic recovery ordinance that was initially a temporary measure to run through mid-May till September 8th, right after Labor Day. That also allowed for the suspension of all rules and regulations, allowed the temporary outdoor dining, temporary business activities outdoors, as well as this closure of State Street to both allow that public safe social distancing and as well as the outdoor dining activity. There was great success and excitement with that State Street closure, and we saw great success with the business activity outdoors. The council was very interested in seeing that forward. The pandemic continued, though. We saw further business restrictions in July. The economic recovery ordinance was extended till December 8th with a 3-month option if the pandemic conditions continue. The council established a State Street subcommittee of 3 council members to oversee the future State Street visioning process, which we're conducting now. And we're recognizing that the temporary conditions that we put in place are really going to be lasting a bit longer. I'm really kind of describing that as interim. Next slide, please. And so as you all, if you have been downtown and have seen State Street, the next slide will illustrate the upgrades that are coming. So we're enhancing, one slide back, please. We're enhancing the traffic control devices with what you see here, renderings, and they'll be in place probably later this year, early next year, or they're going through the process. You can see decorative lighting to lighten up the darkened streets, add better safety traffic control elements, as well as some green paint to organize cyclists as they enter into the blocks. This won't carry through the full blocks. This will be the first 50 feet. This will both kind of create a little better order than what happens today between cyclists and pedestrians. There'll also be signage. You can see the backside of the signage that will be directing pedestrians to the sidewalks and cyclists to the middle of the street. So we're looking forward to seeing these enhancements, upgrades to the space, seeing better public access with the lighting, and then hopefully in time, when the pandemic stay-at-home orders are lifted, maybe greater opportunities to have special events, festivals, and whatnot over time. But for the short term, this is what we have in place, and we're looking forward to gathering your feedback as we envision what could else be added, what could we look at a further basis. And just a side note, if you have tracked it all, the American Institutes of Architects Santa Barbara chapter just had a big public charrette last night. They'll be coming out with materials, posting in the storefronts and then online documents, gathering all of the architectural design concepts that we're envisioning, both State Street as well as physical development of redevelopment, infill development through the downtown. Some really exciting imagery and concepts of sustainability and really good urban design transportation. So with that, I'll introduce my colleague, Rob Dayton, Mr. Dayton, to present really a real series of photographic imageries of the evolution of State Street over time, as well as other pedestrian promenade related streets around the country and the world. So with that, thank you, and look forward to your contributions tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, and Madam Chair, committee members, thank you so much. Actually, if you'll go back to the previous slide, what you see here is in the interim. So that's what we're talking about, what's going to be here for, I don't know, perhaps 2 to 3 years. The question tonight is not about what's going to be here in the interim. The question tonight is what is your vision for the future if State Street was completely redesigned, nothing like you see here. But to get there, let's look at the next slide and talk about the history of State Street and actually how it has evolved. So this is the earliest photo that I have, but there is an earlier picture before this, which is the fact that the Chumash Indians walked up State Street, which was a beaten path, to the Mission. And so State Street was actually a beaten path originally, and it went by the De La Guerra House, which was arguably the center of activity in the town. And then we come to a more formal street after the 1858. Actually, if you go back a slide, please, the 1858 survey of Captain Haley, and this is where we created the order and the street. This is dirt. It has a Victorian influence. You can see the Victorian buildings on the sides, and then you can also see the wooden sidewalk. And then also the mule-driven cart, which was the alternate transportation of the day, and that had a bike rack on the back. The Santa Barbara trolley, the first one is mimicked kind of off of that original cart and trolley. And if we go to the next slide, we can see in 1924, this is right before the earthquake, so the Granada Tower was built that year. You can see the Granada Tower's older marquee that was recently installed. This is at the corner of Anapamu and State Street. You see the Victorian buildings still as an influence. You see one of the electric cars, which this was a two-way system with 2 sets of tracks in the street, and then you see the vehicles. The sidewalks were smaller in 1924, and also you can look at the lighting. It was a Victorian lighting. It actually isn't the lighting that was there today, so just a different type of lighting. The next slide shows after the earthquake. You can see the Spanish Revival starting to take hold on the street. This is at the intersection of Coda and State Street, you can see the Santa Barbara Hotel on the right, which is still there today. And then the wires are already taken down because the streetcars have stopped. And what's really interesting about the story of moving post-earthquake, and which a lot of people don't know, is that the earthquake was not why Spanish Revival took hold. Actually, Spanish Revival was already well underway. It happened because of a man by the name of, a couple by the name of Bernie and Irene Hoffman, who came to Santa Barbara in 1919 because their daughter had diabetes, and Dr. Sampson administered insulin, and she was healed. And they gave back to the community. They purchased the De La Guerra house, and they put forth a vision for Santa Barbara. They built El Paseo behind the De La Guerra house as a demonstration project of what Santa Barbara should be. And then Bernie Hoffman was influential in building City Hall and moving De La Guerra Street, this one section in the 0 and 100 East blocks, in front of the De La Guerra house, so that City Hall could be built where it is, and De La Guerra Plaza would not be cut off. So the vision was on its way before the earthquake hit. And what I want you to just understand here is that the earthquake, if you will, was the accelerant, not the thing that caused the vision to occur. It was the accelerant of the vision that was already in place. So if we go to the next slide, we're just looking at other parts of the street. This is looking up State Street. This is the intersection of Haley and State Street. Many of the buildings on the left are still there today. You can now see the street lights have been changed to that Spanish Revival and away from the Victorian. And then if we go to the next slide, we're looking in the 60s. This is at Christmas time. And you can see the Christmas trees that used to be the full, large Christmas trees that used to be at every single intersection. And just bustling. This street has parking on both sides. It has 4 lanes of traffic with a turn lane in the middle, a wider sidewalks for that time, for that period. And then if we go to the next slide, if you will, the next earthquake hit, not a seismic earthquake, an economic earthquake, and that was the construction of La Cumbre Plaza. La Cumbre Plaza was constructed in 1967. And in that year, there were more retail sales grossed by La Cumbre Plaza than all of downtown. And so the downtown business people got together and decided to do something about it, because the next slide shows that this particular outdoor mall, one of the first in California, provided a park-like setting between the buildings and no vehicles. So the response that the downtown business owners did, next slide shows a view of State Street prior to what they did. And this is looking from the Granada Tower at the Woolworth building there. And then if we go to the next slide, oh my gosh, they actually had the political will to tear up the entire street from Ortega to Victoria Street. If we go to the next slide, they even tore up those railroad tracks in the middle of the street at that time. So going to the next slide, it shows what the completed work was a park-like setting in between the buildings. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see what that looked like then. It was actually called State Street Plaza. We actually refer to in our documents the State Street Plaza. What most people don't know is that State Street Plaza is named after La Cumbre Plaza and not the other way around, which you would probably think. You can see in this picture the original texture of the street, of the sidewalks, which was a Spanish Revival stamped concrete with various colors. You can see some of the street furniture that was trying to be Spanish Revival with various tile elements intermixed with the landscape. And then the next slide shows what the redevelopment agency did in doing the brick sidewalks, 2 lanes of traffic, the right turn lanes, and then you have the electric shuttle on the street, bike lanes. This has the landscape between the bike lanes and the sidewalks. And then we added outdoor dining where it fit throughout the street over time. And then the next slide shows another earthquake. I call it earthquake 3.0. This one was also not seismic. This was economic mixed with a pandemic. And who would have thought that if we close this street during a pandemic, when it's largely not good to be around each other, we would create all this vitality in the center of town on State Street. A complete transformation. Very active, very visited. people loving this, and then all sorts of issues arising around safety because there's too many crowds, or whether it's pedestrians versus bicycles. But these conflicts really are indication of the vibrancy that was caused. And so the council put together this subcommittee, the State Street subcommittee that Mr. Harris has talked about, to talk about the future of State Street and what we would do next. Is this another epoch season where we actually shift the design once more of State Street to something completely different? And that's the question on the next slide. That is the question. What do we do with this street, and for how long in terms of the distance? The closure right now is Haley to Sola. The plaza extends now all the way to Cabrillo. So before we get to your imagination, we want to hear your imagination, and we have some questions for you to help you dream about what the future could hold. Before we have that conversation, we want to take you around the United States and to some other cities overseas to show you some examples of other streets and what has been done. So if we go to the next slide, we'll start in Boulder, Colorado. This is Pearl Street. You can see the landscape. You can see the art in the bronze. If you go to the next slide, you'll see another bronze that depict the animals of the area. And then boulders, of course. This particular layout has the landscape and art in the middle, and then pedestrians on the sides of those, and then outdoor eating along the buildings, and then the buildings themselves. The next slide shows that in the middle, we also have play going on. We have kids, and actually there's multiple locations. If you go to the next slide, we'll show that there's in another block, we have another place where kids play on boulders. And then even more play. If you look at the next slide, we have a splash pad, which duels as passive entertainment for those who would watch, the kids who would play, or for those that want to get in that fountain themselves and be a part of the action. The next slide also shows that there is impromptu entertainment going on Pearl Street, so unplanned entertainment around the famous kiosk. And then next slide shows that there is formal entertainment that is staged by the agency that takes care of Pearl Street. And I just pause on this slide because of the tulips and the flowers. That's pretty manicured space. And then to have this small orchestra staged on the street, that takes some money, not just to get to what you saw in these slides, but also to operate and make this function in such a clean and vibrant way from a floral standpoint. We don't even have flowers on State Street at this point. So if you go to the next slide, you'll also see how Pearl Street converts to other events. There's some open space that converts so people can come in and you can have some festivals. If we go to the next slide, let's go to Denver, since we're in Colorado. And this is their center of town. They actually kept the transit vehicle on the street. If you look at the intersection, you can see the tire marks where the transit vehicle goes one direction on this street. The landscape is largely in the middle, with pedestrians walking just about everywhere, and then restaurant space occurring at various locations throughout, whether in the middle or on the sides. If we go to the next slide, we'll go to Charlottesville, Virginia. This is a smaller scale, building to building. State Street is 80 feet, building to building is the right of way. So this is a little bit something less between 50 and 60. You see the brick pattern, which is similar to what we have on State Street sidewalks. The landscape is in the middle, sidewalks on either side, restaurants sprinkled throughout, and then you see children are playing, not necessarily on formal equipment. If we go to the next slide, we see the same block at Christmas time, so you can see some variation in lights. This is during the evening. You can see the type of lighting they've chosen, some of the iron elements, some seating in the middle, some retail advertising in the right-of-way, see some books. So you can see kind of the activity that it was created in Charlottesville. If we go to the next street, we're going to go to California, 3rd Street Promenade. And this is an interesting story because 3rd Street Promenade was actually originally closed in 1975 and failed pretty bad almost right away. So there was another project in the 80s to bring it back. And what they did was they brought back the vehicle lanes, which you can see on either side of the art and the fountains. and vehicles returned, but also the people did in droves, and they had to close it once again. If we go to the next slide, you can see some of the other elements of 3rd Street Promenade. Along with that art, you see some really nice lighting. You see the street, the drainage to the middle. Of course, the street was intended for vehicles. It's no longer used for vehicles. And then you see movable furniture, which is kind of interesting, movable furniture and outdoor dining sprinkled throughout. Okay, so moving away from America, going to another street. Let's go to Barcelona on the next slide. Actually, no, sorry, still at 3rd Street Place. So this shows that there can also be play elements that are movable. So you have Jenga, you have some blocks that people can play with, and then you see those really popular dinosaurs that are both metal and plants. Next slide, we are going to Barcelona, and this is La Rambla. This is from the city center down to the waterfront. It's very long. It's very formal. You can see the sycamore trees. That pattern continues the entire length of the street. You see that it is very open in the middle. Vehicles on the outsides. There is a small sidewalk where people can walk in front of the stores, but it's not really oriented to the stores. The action is in the middle. You see the movable furniture that is there. And then next slide shows how La Rambla can convert to activities that the city wants, that various businesses coming and going on La Rambla, so it can kind of convert to another thing and then back to open space. If you go to the next slide, we're going to go to France, South France. This is Avignon. This is 3 blocks in Avignon. This is very much like the 500 block with pedestrians in the middle and then dining on both sides, and then pedestrian sidewalks between the dining and the building face. And then the landscape is in that location too. As you can see, the landscape is repetitive and formal. The next slide is a sister city, Nîmes, down the road from Avignon, South France. This is a very formal street that has a fountain that is at an incline going down to the train station. Behind us is the city center. The formal sycamore trees, again, this has vehicle lanes outside the sycamore trees on the left. And then going to next slide, we're going to go to, I believe, Rose Street. This is in Scotland, Edinburgh. So this is a much narrower street, but you can see how the textures with the bricks and then outdoor dining, pedestrians in the middle. There's bike parking, but not bicycling movement on this particular street. If we go to the next one, we're going to go over to, this is in Copenhagen, Denmark. This is really long. This is 1.25 miles long. You can see the texture is kind of a granite tile, very open, very little landscape. This has bikes allowed on it. So building to building, pretty open. And then you can see the pedicabs where people can get a ride on the street. Another example of a convertible street. And then I'll just have you note that as we look at European streets, one of the things that makes them successful is the amount of housing. So most of the buildings you're seeing above the first floor is housing. So these people are living on the street and are likely to be found there daily, in addition to the ones who visit. The next slide shows a Netherlands picture. So Amsterdam, we've got bikes. The bikes have a different texture. They have a red texture they can ride on, and then the pedestrians are separated, but next to them, and then you see the bike parking landscape next to the bike parking, and the other side of that bike parking is the street. So you can see how that works with the dining next to the building. And then the next street, next slide shows a very smaller street. This is a mix of everybody. So pedestrians, bikes, vehicles, and then but much narrower and less outdoor dining opportunities. The next slide shows the same city, Amsterdam. So we're still in Amsterdam. This shows another variation where you have one-way vehicles, bikes two-way on the outside. Then you have bikes and parking bikes and vehicle parking in the middle with landscape there, and then the pedestrians next to the road, and then outdoor dining next to the buildings. So you can see there's quite a variation in how to do a street, probably more than you thought. The next slide shows our questions for you, and we're trying to help you dream. We're trying to help you get to the place where you can get in the future and see and tell us what you're seeing and feeling in what your experience is like. So here's the questions we have to prompt you. We'd love for you to answer these questions, each committee member to answer these. 1, 2, 3. Here's the first question. What do you believe is the reason for redesigning State Street downtown at this time? Or do you believe that we should redesign State Street at this time? And what we mean by redesign is wholesale change what's there now to something different. Do you believe we should do it? And what do you believe is the reason? Next one is, if State Street is redesigned downtown, in other words, if it's all done, let's say it's 5 years from now, everything's done, describe what's going on when you visit. What are you experiencing? Tell us what you're experiencing. And then the last question, what role does a redesigned State Street play in the vitality of downtown? What is another way of thinking about that is State Street the majority of the vitality of downtown? If the redesign was done, would downtown then result in a more vital place, or is State Street 50% of the equation or less, 25% of the equation of success for vitality downtown? And then finally, what is your goal for State Street when you think about influencing downtown vitality? So that is those are our questions, and we'd love to hear one by one. And Madam Chair, I recommend that you just have people come up one at a time and share. We're going to be taking, both Jason and I are going to be taking copious notes. And what we're going to do with these notes is we're going to merge all the notes, and we're going to bring to the subcommittee, the council subcommittee, the major themes, the repeated themes again and again, all those themes that are repeated, the high notes, if you will. And then the subcommittee is going to create a vision statement for State Street and then recommend that to council. So Madam Chair, I turn it back to you.
Hello, I'm unmuting and I'm screening, trying to do this. Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'll just try and do this real simple. I'm just going to call each person one by one, and in the interest of time, if your comments are pretty much similar to the person before you, I don't see any reason why you couldn't say, I share what someone else just said instead of repeating all of it, and then add your own new stuff. But that's just a suggestion. So I'm gonna start, I'll go last, and I'll start with Eve, if she doesn't mind.
Hi.
Hi.
No, I don't mind at all. I can take a first poke at this. Okay, so what do you believe is the reason for redesigning State Street downtown at this time? Wow. I don't have a great answer to that. I guess I can just say, like, we've already started is part of the reason. We're already in this experiment. And so I think we're already collecting data points about what our community wants to see. And so moving this project from being a pilot and so temporary to being more rooted and I guess finished we're in motion here. And I think that's a good thing. I think we're getting a lot of positive feedback about the closing or opening of State Street. So that's a good reason. Again, of course, supporting our business community by revitalizing the space. I don't know, there's been like a multi-year conversation going on around less people being there. And I do think this is also an opportunity to support artists in our community. And I have a lot of friends who would be really excited to be able to play music and to have spaces where they could perform along State Street. And again, I think that it's like an ecosystem. And if we can support artists, that will in turn make people comfortable. And I guess I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of good reasons. That last reason I'll add is just accessibility. What can we do to support transportation in the space for people of all abilities? And so not only just people who are there in visiting the businesses, but moving through this space, and especially people who might have accessibility issues and need special considerations. Okay, second question. Should I move to the second one, or are we going to take Okay.
That would be great.
Yeah. If State Street is redesigned downtown, describe what is going on when you visit. What are you experiencing? A lot of the things I've already touched on in my first answers. So just being able to feel like you can move through there because it is also a street and part of our transportation grid and an important part of our transportation grid. So being able to move through the space safely, accessibly, you know, if you have mobility challenges, like just that like curbs are sloped, that there's enough room for you to get around in a wheelchair, things like that. And also I think just making sure that the space is beautiful, that it's something that you want to be in. Yes, okay, so trying to keep that higher level. I'll move to the next question. What role does a redesigned State Street play in the vitality of downtown, and what is your goal for State Street? Redesigning State Street plays a pretty significant role. I mean, just the urban design and urban feel of a space can make or break places, and making sure that State Street feels like a place you want to be is going to be pretty critical to, you know, supporting our downtown businesses and creating culture in Santa Barbara. At the same time, though, I get the sense that it's like 50% of the equation. When we talk about downtown and the downtown of a city, it's hard to think of a place where there isn't housing downtown immediately there. Like just the word downtown kind of encompasses like housing and people, right? And so having this downtown where there's only people for like 50% of the day, it just seems like we're only 50% of the way to a downtown. And I think about that, I mean, going a little beyond this question, but thinking about this in like the framework of like, what does Santa Barbara need? And we just need housing, especially housing for like the middle income and lower income people, and for the creative class, people who would want to live in a downtown, if I can make assumptions here. So I think part of the role of redesigning State Street is planning to accommodate those people and to integrate them into our community. So those would be goals for State Street. So housing, a space that you want to be in, a space that is accessible for transportation for people biking, walking, and especially people with accessibility needs. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Committee Member Sanford. And I would just say, Madam Chair, that if you do agree with someone that said something, make sure that you highlight that one thing that you really do agree with, because remember, we're building on the themes that are the most popular. So if you really want that one across, say something.
That sounds great. Okay, can we now go to Andres? There he is. Committee Member Malavos. Sorry, I'm being too informal. Thank you.
Well, first off, Rob, that was a great slide through history. I really appreciated looking and seeing that. You know, I see this as kind of a whole redesign and kind of turning the corner, and lots of bits and pieces you talk about there, from housing to the change to the commercial element of State Street. So I'm really excited that this has been a catalyst to revisiting what the future of State Street holds. So I think this is a major turn in the history of this street, and glad to be a part of it. Largely agree with what Eve was saying on, you know, that first point. And the second point is, if State Street is redesigned, and what are you really experiencing? I'd say maybe from, you know, roughly my 35 years, what it was when I was a kid and what it is now, it's definitely turning more into an experience. So coffee, dinner, breakfasts, the festivals and parades that we have downtown. I think, you know, you brought up that one point around arts and the culture, where you get that on Cabrillo, but that's largely been not so much an element on State Street, which would be fantastic to see in the future, but kind of the hub for the culture of Santa Barbara for the dining experience, whereas maybe the commercial side has been declining in years. And then definitely, you know, part of the broader ecosystem is what is the broader elements at play, to the question 3 there. You know, I think the Delavina and Anacapa as other alternative modes or streets to commute on the city. I think there'll also be the big topic of parking for those that do want to go get a cup of coffee or park their bike, park their car. I'm sure those would other be likely mentioned elements also alongside the bike parking, bike commuting through State Street. So definitely not the only element in it, but I think largely agree with all that's been mentioned around housing and parking and bicycle transportation on State Street.
So just to be clear, Committee Member Malovas, you're saying you want to see, what you see in your future design is a blend of pedestrian and bicycles, but somehow getting along better or pace appropriated or something like that?
Well, I would see with perhaps Delavina and Anacapa being more for vehicle traffic, where people would tend on maybe on bicycles to gravitate towards State Street. So to have some sort of a consideration that they do have a role for both pedestrians and bicycles. Yeah, just making sure that, because I would imagine that people would gravitate towards the slower traffic on State Street.
And then the last question.
The last one, largely, the other elements besides just the revamp of State Street. One thing that kind of, when you go through the comparison to other streets across the globe, is one thing about State Street is the parades and the festivities that we have on that. And you highlighted a couple about non-permanent features. And kind of curious to, that's been such a large part of our city, is these festivities, is both an opening of State Street to more pedestrian-oriented traffic and also flexibility towards those celebrations. So I think that'd be a big part of it, and also the elements of parking and residential.
Okay, great. It's really interesting. That's come up in previous conversations, and a couple conversations have mentioned Cabrillo Boulevard as a substitute for celebration and parades. But it was just a thought.
Thank you very much. It was terrific. And do we have David Collum here today? Is that correct? I was getting confused on my.
Yes, I'm.
You're here. It was David Hodges, who is no longer going to be with us. So David Collum, please. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So with regards to the reason for redesigning State Street, I think we really have an opportunity, given the pandemic and the economic issues, to sort of reduce kind of the alienation and the isolation of a car-centric downtown, and kind of bring the focus back on the experience of the community, which I think is a really interesting opportunity. And so bringing the use of State Street kind of to more of a residential focus while still catering to tourists is, I think, a really big thing. And just to echo a statement that Committee Member Malovas said, the encouragement of more residential development, I think, would be a really big boon there. And I think that the further development of making it kind of a place where exciting things happen and a place to live would be really helpful there. As far as what's going on when you visit, interestingly enough, I went to college in Madison, Wisconsin. We also have a car-free street that is coincidentally called State Street. So, I immediately draw comparisons to that, and there's just all sorts of, for State Street in Madison, the big focus is on, football game weekends and things like that. But that's not to say that, Santa Barbara can't have that sort of, that's Wisconsin's culture. But, bringing, as Committee Member Sanford said, encouraging that art and that music culture, and a lot of diversity in restaurants. I also see, as has been echoed, focused on alternative transportation methods. In Madison, Wisconsin, buses are the only transportation allowed on State Street. I think, despite, I believe there's a setback with the City Council this week or last week regarding a bike share program, but doing a bike share or something like that would be a really interesting thing. And then, continuing some outdoor dining, but perhaps when the pandemic ends, like opening up a little bit more space so that you can have those buses, so that you can have a little bit more biking. I think that would be really interesting to just sort of build up that alternative transit there. And then as far as the role that it plays in the vitality, I think just making it a destination center for either residents or tourists, if they're looking for something on their Friday, something interesting to do, to draw them into State Street specifically, so that it can kind of be rebuilt as a residential, or as a place for residents to go, I think is really what I would like to see going forward. And so I don't think anything I've said really differs very strongly from the ideas that have been stated so far. And I think I just want to reinforce that time. So I think that's all I have to say there.
Committee member Colvin, how about what role do you think redesigned State Street plays in the vitality of downtown, since we were talking about that before the pandemic hit?
Yeah, sorry. I think I touched on that, but basically just making it a destination for residents. If they're looking for some sort of a different experience, you know, and this can be for tourists as well, but just if they're looking for something different, if they're looking for something to do, making State Street that destination, I think is a big benefit there.
So State Street, in your view, State Street is the main piece of downtown economic vitality.
I think it would be great if it could be, yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you, David. That was very, very helpful. And now Susan Horn, are you ready to share?
Yeah, if I can find how to do my screen.
You're on video.
Oh, share
Just-
my webcam. That must be it. There I am.
Yay.
Way to go.
Okay, so what do you believe is the reason for redesigning it? Because it was in trouble and we need a better community and commercial space. If State Street is redesigned, describe what's going on when you visit. So here's where most of my ideas are. I picture a promenade or like a European plaza. The plaza idea I think is really great, but promenade, you know, in my mind is people walking, maybe a shuttle or nearby transportation, but a lot of walking and art outdoors, dining, music, art, play areas, let's see, some good places to sit, a lot of good places to sit, and also spaces, open spaces for events that would be very adaptable. One of the things that I saw in different cities, like on the High Line in New York City, you know, where they took the railroad track that was elevated and they made it into a park. They have a place where there are tiers, like seating, like a stadium, but you know, they're not that kind of, you know, they're permanent. And they also have something like this in San Luis Obispo on a very small scale, downtown in San Luis. I think that would be great for seeing events or just people watching or, you know, enjoying the atmosphere or whatever. So that's kind of a side idea. Okay, so this kind of merges into the next one too, but what role does a redesigned State Street play in the vitality of downtown? What's your goal? Again, like a plaza, a public space that really draws the community. And for eating, shopping, seeing friends, enjoying, you know, entertainment and art and music, housing nearby, or perhaps integrated. But one of the things that happened in a city near where my sister lives in France is that the town there started getting emptied out as, I guess, as suburbs grew, maybe. I mean, people were moving more out of town. And I was talking about why that was happening, because it seemed like the town was so great, you know, as a tourist walking around and along the river and all these houses and everything. And one of the things I heard was that there was too much noise. People were sick of it and ready to get away. And I thought, well, maybe that would be an important thing, to not put housing, not put all the housing right on the street. If you're going to have entertainment or movies or concerts or whatever, maybe not to have so much housing right there on State, facing State, maybe a little bit back or something like that. I mean, just as a thought to consider the noise for the people that are residents. So those are my ideas.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. That's great. Hillary, you're up next. Ms. Blackerby. There she is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. Hi. So I've thought about this quite a lot because I think I've seen Rob give this presentation like in 4 other meetings so far.
Thank you for your.
Because what I do with my time is watch.
Is he doing okay? Is he doing okay? Just between you and me.
He's got it down. He's got it down for sure. So first of all, the reason for redesigning State Street at this time, which I think, yes, it's been time. Pre-pandemic, it was time. I think the reason is we're certainly, I think, as a community, but hopefully as a society, moving away from being so car-centric and focusing more on, like someone said, experiences, but just, I think, focusing on people. And that's what I am really interested in here, and kind of the types of people and how people get to experience it. That's what I sort of bring it back for, because that's really what cities are made of. Buildings are important, but the people are really what makes it what it is. And so I think it's important to redesign it for locals. Yes, of course, tourists, but locals especially. So I'm excited to be, I'm excited to be here in town when this is happening. There have been other generations who got to do this too, and I'm excited to be part of one of them. So people will either blame us or thank us 20 years from now. So the second question, describe what's going on when you visit. What are you experiencing? I think a lot of things. So I think for one, when I think about how someone gets there and how they get around, right? Mobility is obviously something I'm interested in. I think that getting there are a lot of different modes you can use. So you can come by bike, you can get there and then, use a bike share bike. You can walk or roll, you can skateboard, dare I say it. You can roller skate, you can rollerblade, you can take transit, both to get there and to get around. And I really think about, sort of the current state of things on State Street. I've been really concerned about the access for, sort of people who aren't able-bodied or people who have mobility issues. And it's become less than ideal, while for a lot of people, it's become super ideal. And so I just feel like we want to make sure we're not leaving anyone out. Other things I'm experiencing, I'm seeing all kinds of people of all ages, families, kids having fun, being able to have fun safely, so that parents don't have to worry. All kinds of locals, people from all over the community. It's a place that they want to come, and it's a place they feel welcome and they feel safe. If I've biked there, there's secure bike parking. There's no more hitching posts ever, please. Maybe for horses. I think HLC mentioned horse hitching posts the other day, but no hitching posts for bikes. Definitely public art that's not just pops up once a year, but is there. It can change, but that there's public art. There's music, both formal and informal, other kinds of performances. There are dogs being walked, maybe even cats. It's that kind of scene. And then, I mentioned mobility, but, some of those old pictures, which are so great, and I've done a little research on kind of the history of transit in Santa Barbara back to the 1800s. And for, a very large portion of time, both at the beginning and the past, almost since the early 90s, there's always been transit on State Street. And while people in the past didn't always have the right answers, have it all figured out, I think we should challenge ourselves to think about like, hey, maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's something to being able to move a decent size, a decent number of people all at once. And so, we have a very long downtown, and that's something we always kind of lament or just, reckon with. So I think another thing you're experiencing is the district concept, that there's different areas, there's the arts district, there's, sort of entertainment, things like that. I think that could really sort of not chop it up, but section it in ways that make it more interesting. And generally being downtown and being a Santa Barbara resident and a proud, sort of member of the public and civic participant, when I go down, what I want to experience is what is very clearly a public place and a public space that is clear, it's open to all. It's clear that it's not privatized, and that people, even if they don't spend a single dime, are allowed to be down there. Not just moving through, but even sitting, even just people watching. That I think is a really, really important aspect of a city and of a good downtown. And, when it comes to vitality, what role does it play? A lot of people have said it, but I'll say it again, housing. I want it to be people's outdoor living space, and that will make it, that will enhance the vitality. I want it to be my outdoor living space. I don't live very far from State Street, but I would love to live even closer. And a place where there are a lot of different kinds of people living there. So not just people who can afford luxury lofts, but all kinds of people. And a place where small businesses can afford to have, for the retail space, that small businesses can afford to have their businesses on State Street, right? That it's not just chain stores who can afford it, that there's local coffee shops, that there's local boutiques. That's, something I'm kind of worried about as we head towards redevelopment. And that's something I think is really crucial to making it an interesting downtown, because you can go to an Old Navy about anywhere. No shade to Old Navy, but like, that's not the thing you go to Santa Barbara, right, to see. But yeah, I think that's mostly what I have in mind. But it's fun to think about. Oh, one other thing I didn't mention, public restrooms, that there's more public restrooms, not just the one by Marshall. So I think that's important for everyone. It also means people are more likely to actually stay downtown and continue to enjoy it instead of rushing back to their hotel room or their house. So that's what I've got. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question, Rob. The very first slide that your colleague put up with the green bike stripe going straight down the middle of State Street.
Yes.
What was that? Is that saying we're gonna have that soon, or what was that about?
That is, yes, that's an interim piece of work. So not very temporary, but more permanent than just, 6 months. It'd probably be on the street for something like 3 months for about 2 to 3 years. And the purpose of it is to, we've got actually, Ms. Grant, if you could go to that slide, I think it's the second slide in the presentation. I'll explain it. So we're completely off topic though now. So we're pull out of your visioning of State Street. Now we're looking at just the next 2 to 3 years.
It ties into my visioning comments, or I wouldn't ask.
Okay. So what we're trying to accomplish here are two things. We're trying to get rid of construction feel. So right now at those intersections, you see barricades and it doesn't look really good. We have borrowed palms in crates. So this is a little bit more formal. These are plastic pots, but they are terracotta looking, and they will have flowers and plants. And then you see some bollards that look like they're iron. They're not, they're plastic, but they'll look iron. So they look a little bit more formal. And then the purpose of having the green in the middle is to distinguish the bicycling area from the walking area. And what we're hoping is by doing this at every single intersection, we hope that the pedestrians will move to the crosswalks, move to the outside, and the bikes will move to the middle, kind of resetting everybody every block to try to create some order. And once again, Madam Chair, the biggest issue has been the bike versus ped conflict. So this is what this is trying to create some order in the next 2 to 3 years while we get to the dreams that your committee members have been casting.
I love it. So the green is going to only be at the entrance to the block, and then, because if you look further down, there's no room for everybody.
It's about 50 feet on 50 feet on each side of the intersection, and then it's hash stripe through the intersection. And then
Okay.
we're going to also try to put some resets at mid blocks where we have the space.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay, that opens my thank you everyone. I really have appreciated hearing your comments and very much. And I asked some of my friends to kind of get a feel for what they were thinking too for my own comments. And I think that everyone, we've all agreed that we want, okay, let me back up. First, what do you believe is the reason for redesigning it? Economic revitalization. And, most recently, of course, the pandemic pushed that over the edge, so I think that's the reason that the motivation has happened. If it's redesigned, what's going on when you visit down there? Everyone said it, art, music, shopping, restaurants. I especially want to see housing, and I think it can be done very well. Rob, I don't know if other board members, other committee members are aware of the work of Stefan Palazoides, but I know you are. And he is a brilliant architect who redesigned Old Town Pasadena and brought it back to life. He also has just been, by the way, appointed Dean of Architecture at the University of Notre Dame. So he's very, very successful and prominent and has done some wonderful work using new urbanism, the Awani principles, things that I think are really useful and helpful in what could be a beautiful redesigned downtown Santa Barbara. You don't have to have canyonization. We could have new apartment buildings or apartment dwellings in the buildings that exist, maybe creating some more balconies, pull the building back from the street a little bit. It wouldn't be the second or third floor looming. There's so many ways it can be done, without canyonization. And I'd really like to see that kind of creativity in the whole new redesigned downtown. I hearken back to Fiesta parades where we would get up on the balcony at Chris Casebeer's real estate office right next to the Arlington and other friends who have offices over there and balconies, recessed dwellings, a lot of really wonderful things I think could be done with some rezoning. So if I'm downtown, then I'm going to feel like it's a really alive city, not just a social place for the nighttime, but a really alive town center that you feel something's happening every time of day for a different reason. And I think my colleagues have painted a beautiful picture. So what does a redesigned State Street play in the vitality of downtown? I think I've just described it. It creates a central place for commerce, for socialization. And my goal, I'm really disturbed by, and I don't have a solution, but I'm disturbed by the sense that bikes and skateboards are just like everywhere and too fast, because little children, you know, can get hit easily. And I have unfortunately seen several situations where skateboarders and bicyclists are just zipping around, and you're acutely aware of it. I bring to mind when you go to the UCSB for a basketball game, the bike path to get into the Thunderdome is a gauntlet, because the students just fly by. There's no little blinker lights to prevent anybody from, you know, missing a bicyclist. So it's dangerous when you have a bike lane that is a bike lane and people are crossing it, but it's not real clear who's supposed to do what. So the bike lane idea, although I understand that you've got to do what you got to do, in my perfect world, the bikes would be off to the side or something, because I would much rather see most of the drawings, the pictures you showed, there weren't any vehicles. I was really paying attention. And the places that were like, had playground areas, my gosh, I wouldn't want bikes zipping right next to where the kids are playing on blocks or movable furniture. So, and Las Ramblas is a lot wider so that there's enough room for a vehicle lane on either side of a very large plaza. So I think it's a tough problem. I really clearly see that. And I would rather see, some of my friends are big bike people, but I would rather see people and bike parking at the corners, quite frankly, if that could be done. And I don't think everyone would agree with me, but that's my vision. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, good for you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Madam Chair and committee members.
Hello,
Really?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Susan. I don't know how to turn on the camera, but anyway, I just wanted to add one thing. Thank you.
Yeah, and then people, just to say this, Madam Chair, some people actually may want to add stuff like Ms. Horn is doing, which is because they hear someone else. So that's totally appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, hi, go Susan.
Okay, sorry to come at the end, but I've been thinking all through this after I talked, and from something one of the other people said is that's really important to me is that there be affordable housing in this on State Street, and that there be a real mix of people of all different incomes, and I don't know how that can be done, but if there are new buildings being built and renovations happening, maybe it's possible. But I really think that's important to me, that the city have places for all incomes.
Yeah,
To live.
I agree completely, and that's what new urbanism. That's one basic principle of new urbanism, and I think I'm glad you spelled that out because I didn't, but I agree completely. And with what Hillary envisioned, you know, a city that is very inclusive and that you can come and sit down and you don't have to buy anything. You can enjoy the street without having to buy a coffee or anything. I think that's fabulous. Anyone else? Please feel free to chime in. There's Hillary.
One thing I wasn't super clear about maybe, but I think when it comes to being able to get around, I do think it is important that each mode have its own space. And so having dedicated bike lanes, having a dedicated transit lane, one way I think is fine. And then designated pedestrian space, when you reduce those conflicts, right? We know this, we've been on this committee long enough. You want to reduce conflicts between modes. And, that's when you get into trouble. When it's not predictable, when it's not clear where you're supposed to be, depending on how you're getting around, that's when problems happen, right? And that's what's happening now. And so, I think it's important to keep our eye on the prize of saying, like, right now there's a lot of no one on this committee did it, but in the community, there's some sort of like pedestrians versus cyclists conversation going on, when I think we need to just remember, like, there's two really dangerous things going on State Street, right? It's cars that cross streets and it's a deadly virus. So those are the things that are hurting people. It's not bikes in large part, right? So just keeping in mind that if we put everything in its place downtown, it'll be safer, right? And thinking about that vision zero, that's a bell that can't be unrung. And I think we should remind ourselves of that if we're focusing on data and actual numbers, reminding us what makes us safer. And when one of those E's, right, is engineering. And so whatever we do, wherever we put people, I think not having that mixed up, everyone should be downtown in different modes, but they're not all saying like, is this a free for all, get in where you fit in. Basically, we want to make sure that, bikes have designated space, pedestrians have designated space, and it just makes it clear for everybody. So I think I just wanted to clarify that, because there's a lot of, I think, drama, real or imagined, downtown right now because everyone's mixing.
That actually, committee member Blackaby, that's a really important point. And I haven't really gotten an opportunity to say this in a public setting before, but when you point out the conflict is real between bikes and peds, and it really is. But one thing to remember, and this is very important, you bring up Vision Zero, is that State Street in this area used to be the least safe pedestrian and bicycle place in the city, and now it's the safest place for bicycling and walking in the city. And when people suggest putting the bikes, at least for now, not on the permanent, but for now, over to Anacapa and Chapala, actually we would make it less safe for bikes because then they would be interacting with vehicles, and we would be back to that situation where when a vehicle hits a bike, it's a higher price to pay than let's say a bruise or a twisted ankle that might happen on State Street. So just thank you for pointing that out.
Good point. Good point.
Okay, so Madam Chair, if there's no more input, don't forget to do public comment.
Oh, that's right. Okay, is our moderator going to help me do that?
Yes, she will.
Yes.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Madam Chair. At this current time, we don't have any members of the public watching. We did have a couple at the beginning, but at this time, we have no public comment.
Okay, well, that's okay. That's just fine. Well, shall we move on to our 5-year plan?
Hey, Kathleen, sorry, I dropped off the call for a second, but can I add really quick comments to that?
Sure.
Item. Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to echo what Susan said and Hillary said. I didn't explicitly say this, so I want to be on the record about it, since I assume this is going to make it to council at some point, along with a lot of other public comment. But I definitely want to see affordability prioritized in whatever we do at State Street, whether that means creating public spaces where you're allowed to just sit, getting rid of the city's sit and lie ordinance, and also just building affordable housing. And I know that we have reformed the AUD program to include State Street, and so I'd be explicitly interested in us increasing the affordability required on AUD projects from like I think it's 10% right now to 20% as just like, one step we can take to making sure that that any of the housing we build is affordable. The second thing I want to say is that I also agree like there with what Hillary was saying around designating spaces for people so they understand how to move through State Street. American culture, Santa Barbara culture, even though we're pretty bike friendly, I think a lot of people are still learning how to use their bike and where to use their bike and etiquette. And one thing we can do to help them is giving them space, to just making it a little easier, designating space and giving them space, and I think that that would help a lot to alleviate some of the issues that State Street is experiencing right now and that people are experiencing down there. So thank you. How do I?
Thanks, Eve. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thanks for your presentation. That was wonderful. Okay, now we're moving on to capital improvements with Jessica. Jessica Grant is going to present the next section of the meeting, you guys, and take it away.
All right. Well, good evening, Chair Rodriguez and committee members. I am here tonight to discuss the 5-year capital program, which is for fiscal years 22 to 26, and also go over the Draft Streets capital improvement program budget for fiscal years 22 and 23. As we just had in the first item where we're visioning State Street, and what's exciting about capital programming is because it starts with the vision and discussion for various projects in the city, and then eventually they make their way into the capital program. And then even more exciting is then they hopefully then get funded so to make those visions a reality. Since some of our committee members are new to the streets, or actually to the city's capital program process, I will provide a little bit of background in general on the city's capital improvement program. So our program happens we revisit it every 2 years, and then they're 5-year programming documents. And the program identifies unmet capital needs and provides a plan for priority capital projects. Again, the first 2 years of the 5-year program are projects that are quote unquote budget ready. And then also the program assists with securing grant funding as well. So the selection of projects for the capital improvement program is not a one-size-fits-all priority setting process. And this is due to a variety of specialized funding sources in the framework of adopted plans and policies. I would say in general, whether you're in the streets capital program, waterfront program, the parks program, I would say the common themes of what gets priorities is it comes down to safety and maintaining existing infrastructure. And then again, from there, funding, there's a lot of funding sources that fund the capital program. I'll go into more detail, of course, with the streets transportation program. This is just a list of some of the funding sources that feed into the city's capital program. Again, I won't, because it's already pretty late, I won't go into all these details, but happy to answer questions on any of these funding sources. I'll spend more time just on what feeds into the streets planning, streets transportation capital program. Just in general, that was part of your Exhibit B is all the streets transportation capital projects. But for this is the format of how the project summaries are is the same, whether you're a parks project, waterfront, or airport project, is that you have the title of where the program is at the top right-hand corner, and then followed by the project title, and then the description of the project, and then where is this project coming from? Is it from city council direction? Is it coming from, and like in this project example, from like the bicycle master plan. And then there's also a status of where this project's at. Has it received funding? Are we seeking funding? And then it goes over what the capital costs are and breaks down funding, what has been the prior year expenses in the current budget year. And then of course the 5-year programming. If it's beyond 26, we see it as sort of beyond a future needs, but we want to continue to flag it early if it's a project of importance. And then there's just drivers of what's driving this project. Is it public safety in this case for this project, support of city plans, and that it has the opportunity to receive outside funding. So let's dive into our streets transportation program. This is part of your exhibits A and B. Exhibit A had a list of all 81 projects and just a general overview of the funding. Exhibit B is each project description of the 81 projects. I will not go over each of the 81 projects tonight, but myself and Laura Yanez, principal engineer, as well as Derek Bailey, our city's traffic engineer, are also available for any questions you may have on specific projects. In general, because we have so many projects, we have the most out of any program in the city. We try to break them down into different themes. And so in this case, we have bike facilities, bridges, corridor improvements, drainage, intersection improvements, maintenance, pedestrian enhancements, streetlights, and traffic signals. And of course, last time some of you were here for our capital improvement program presentation from a couple years ago, and we introduced Vision Zero as a strategy. And so you'll see that language in some of the project descriptions if we have flagged this as a Vision Zero priority project. I did want to spend time on at least what's coming new of the 81 projects. We have 7 new projects to add, and we also have 7 renamed projects, and I'll go into that detail. Under the bike facilities category, we have the bicycle master plan. We've had that project before for implementation. And we're doing really well with the phase 1 program of projects. And now for the fiscal years up to 2025 is to implement phase 2 projects. And some of those we've already begun work on. The 2 items, the Eastside Community Paseos and Westside Community Paseos, those are existing projects. It's part of the Active Transportation Program funding. We renamed them from sort of the bike boulevard and green conflict striping names to just the commuter Paseo network. We wanted to just show for those that it is really a network, not only within like the East Side neighborhood, for example, but from the East Side to downtown. And just like the West Side Community Paseos, a strong connection of bike routes in the West Side neighborhood and then from the West Side to downtown. Another thing that we have a need for is geospatial inventory of current and proposed bike infrastructure. We will be having, with a lot of the pavement maintenance, we've had updates in some of our bike lanes, and then with the new infrastructure coming online, we want to make sure that everything's up to date in our GIS systems. And also wayfinding signage as we start to grow our network over the next few years. Where can we add any additional signage? And it doesn't have to be just a sign with a pole. It could also be additional pavement markings as well, just to make the bike connections very strong for those that are using them and easy to follow. For the bridge projects, joining this capital program is the Hollister Street Bridge replacement at Tuckalooty Creek and the Islay Street Bridge replacement at Mission Creek. Islay Street Bridge is downtown. Hollister Street Bridge is near the city airport. Both of those bridges are structurally deficient, and so we're working with Caltrans to get programming from the Highway Bridge program and programmed over the next few years. For corridor improvements, we have the Cliff Drive Urban Highway to Complete Streets project. We renamed that one. Before, I think we just had a general name of Cliff Drive improvements, but with all the outreach over the past, well, this one has at least 8 years of outreach, but we have over the past year finalized sort of the project description and vision based upon community output. And this is one of the ones that we applied for grant funding for ATP Cycle 5 for improvements to have a off-street bike path and then lots of pedestrian improvements as well. The De La Vina Safe Crossings Buffered Bike Lane, that is the one that's downtown. Before in our capital program, we just had all of De La Vina Street as a project, but we broke it off into downtown and then upper De La Vina. So the downtown De La Vina Safe Crossings and Buffered Bike Lane, which is between Carrillo and Haley Streets, and from Haley at De La Vina to Chapala. That is one of the active transportation programs projects that we have received funding for. The Milpas Street Crosswalk Safety and Sidewalk Widening Project. Again, we just had a general name for it before for some improvements, but after lots of outreach, we have a more detailed description for that one. And that's another one that we applied for ATP Cycle 5 funding for in September. Mission Street and State Street Lighting Corridor is a new project, and that's just based upon safety data that there is a need for a countermeasure to have nighttime, to address nighttime collisions, is to add more lighting to make drivers more aware of their surroundings and enhancing available sight distances. And the proposed project would include a lighting along Mission Street between Gillespie and Anacapa, and on State Street between Arriaga Street and Constance Avenue. The Upper De La Vina Gap Closure and Safe Crossings. This one removes one vehicle lane on De La Vina between Alomar and Padre, so that Class 2 bike lanes can be extended through the neighborhood. And there would also be crossing enhancements as well along that corridor, as well as some sidewalk infill near the route on Padre Street. That's another project we've just recently applied for ATP grant funding for. And then the West Side and Lower West neighborhood active transportation planning improvements, that is what you had seen over the past year. And this plan was adopted by City Council in March of 2020. And so there was a list of to address residents' needs as for biking and walking. We have put together also another active transportation program grant, Cycle 5 for this one. And the last one that we're seeking some grant funding for the Highway Safety Improvement Program is sidewalk infill on Cariel. That would be between Treasure Drive and Las Positas Road. And this was identified in a citywide safety analysis where pedestrian and bicycle versus vehicle injury collisions were identified along this corridor. One of the things we'll probably add to the list as the item that was just before us was revisioning State Street. We don't have a description yet because we're just going through all of the different review boards, but we hope to probably add that as well to the capital program. So how are these all funded? I will go into the sources of what makes up our streets and transportation capital program. We first have the utility users tax, which is a general tax levied on the use of residential and commercial utility services. And the utility users tax is 6%, and under City Council policy that they've established that half of the amount of those utility user tax monies go to the streets capital and maintenance. Measure A is the 1/2 cent sales tax approved by Santa Barbara County voters back in 2008. And these funds are generated for transportation projects, including pedestrian and bicycle facilities, support for local transit, local road improvements, and local and street sidewalk infill and maintenance programs. SB1 funding, that is a new source since the last time I did this presentation 2 years ago. SB1 is for road repair and and Accountability Act of 2017 and provides funds mainly from gas tax to cities to fix their existing infrastructure. And we receive about 1.7 million per year from that funding source. And then the game changer is Measure C. It was approved by Santa Barbara residents in November of 2017 to provide Santa Barbara critical infrastructure and essential community services. And it's provided a 1 cent general purpose local sales transaction and use tax. And this Measure C became effective in April 2018, and it generates approximately $22 million per year to provide funded for general purpose funding, which can be used for critical infrastructure to address deferred maintenance of city facilities and to replace city buildings like the police station. So given this, let's move on to what we would program for fiscal years 22 and 23. So as part of the staff report, this is can be found in your Exhibit C. It will look different for this. I did try to color code it to just kind of group some of the project themes together. And for this one, a lot of, we get approximately, I would say in the ballpark of $3 to $4 million a year from utility users tax, Measure A, and SB1 funds. And taking the bulk of that is our, pavement maintenance from these funds. And it's really the SB1 and the utility users tax that funds our pavement maintenance. And also pavement maintenance is funded in Measure C as well, that I'll go into detail later. And a lot of these projects, for example, for the bridge projects, so those are funded from Measure A, and these are all the matching funds. For in the bridge program, the state will fund, I think it's, forget the exact formula, but it's about 88%. And then 11% is funded as matching funds from our city. So it's a great opportunity to leverage those funds for what we receive. And we also do not have our current projections in yet on the utility users tax, Measure A or SB1. We'll start to get those numbers from the various entities over the next few months. And again, generally speaking, we usually get about $3 to $4 million a year. Just to put in context for FY21 budget, I think it was originally programmed for 3.9 million, but then there was the adopted budget ended up being 2.7 million this year, just to reflect updated projections due to the pandemic. So Measure C, what we're funding this year in 2021, you probably see that there's lots of activity on our roads related to pavement maintenance. It's something that we've been in a deficit for so many years. So we're just trying to catch up on all that needed road repair. In addition to the road repair, you'll also see that a lot of there's access ramps constructed with the pavement projects and some minor sidewalk infill as well. Also being funded this year is a infill sidewalk project on Hollister Road and in the general vicinity of the long-term parking lot on Hollister Street. That would be on sidewalk on both sides of that street in that section, and then connecting to other existing sidewalk along the Hollister corridor. So of the $22 million that the city receives, on average, the streets are getting about 17 million of that. And like I said, we were in a deficit for so many years that, this 17 million goes pretty quickly just in trying to get our streets back up to the right pavement condition index that it requires. So for Measure C of what's being proposed for fiscal years 22 and 23, again, it's the projects are right around that $17 million mark, and the majority of them are existing just maintenance for drainage and pavement maintenance, sidewalk maintenance, etc., and with our traffic signal maintenance program as well. There's a couple more project-related ones that would be new, and I'll highlight those in the next couple of minutes. The first one being the corridor improvements on Anacapa Street between Gutierrez and Healy Streets. This would bring Anacapa from one-way road in this section to a two-way. And the reason for this is if you're going on westbound Gutierrez from Garden Street, and then eventually if you decide you've passed Anacapa and you want to go back to Laguna or East Side neighborhoods, then you have to go through the State Street Gutierrez intersection and then work your way around. As you may know from the Lower State Street Connectivity Project, the State and Gutierrez intersection has one of the highest collision rates in the city. So this would help divert some of the traffic off of State and Gutierrez to make that intersection safer. And then the Lower State Street Connectivity Project, you've seen that's one of our active transportation program grants, and that is to widen sidewalk under the 101 freeway, and as well as to put buffered bike lanes there. And so City Council had program money when we went after that grant that we would have some matching funds. And so the matching funds go into effect on fiscal year 23. For grants, it's really, we still continue, if we want to do anything new for in the city for infrastructure beyond just maintaining what we have, is we need grants. And so the graph here, which is also referenced in your Exhibit E, is just showing what we have programmed. So we've received all of these grant sources, but then a lot of what the grants, there's certain times of years where the actual money will be released. And so these are programmed to be, this is a list of grants that are programmed in fiscal years 22 and 23. So the bike facilities ones, the East Side Community Paseos and West Side Community Paseos, and the corridor improvements, De La Vina crossings, and then the Lower State Street Crossing Connectivity Project. Those again are the active transportation program grants that we'll be receiving funding for. And as far as the bridge projects, that's under the Highway Bridge Program. And so those are the amounts that we anticipate to be programmed in FY 22 and 23. For the pedestrian enhancement crosswalk improvements, those are from the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And those ones would, there's several projects connected with those. They're great Vision Zero projects, and they would be implementing crosswalk improvements at the intersections of Bath and Sola, Bath and Victoria, Cannon Perdido and Nopal, and Old Coast Highway and Salinas with that project. So the next steps is just to finalize the program of projects next month. And then Planning Commission is anticipated in January or February of next year, followed by City Council. And when it goes to Planning Commission and City Council, they'll be reviewing the entire city capital improvement program at all of those meetings. All of your comments will be forwarded on to the Planning Commission and City Council for consideration. And then the citywide budget is approximately adopted in May and June of 2021. So again, we request to provide comments on the capital program and also on our draft program budget for 22 and 23. And with that, I conclude the presentation.
Hi there. I was just trying to get my webcam back on. Well, thank you very much, Jessica. I really appreciate having seen this. I think this was my third time, maybe, because I've been on the committee a long time. This was a really nice overview, and we did save a lot of trees this year and not doing the huge summary. But if there are specific comments anyone needs to make or wishes to make, I think we can do that now. How do you? Anyone wishing to speak up? No, doesn't look like it. Well, if you don't mind, I know this is kind of a nerdy question, but on Exhibit E, I think those were highlighted numbers. They weren't intended to total up, if I understood that correctly. I got confused. Hillary, would you like to make some comments, dear?
Go ahead with your question. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, just explain to me. I know this is not a complete budget document, it's just highlights. So like when you have just the very first one, bike facilities, you've got 2,438,000, and then the total award is 2,736,000. And I thought, how did we get to there?
Yeah. Yes, Madam Chair, for this, yes, this is a project that has been going on in our process. And so this, the 2.4 that were million that's anticipated in fiscal year 22 would be the construction funding for this project. So up until that time, and right now we're still currently in the design phase. So we're spending money for what was programmed for the design phase. So for these grants, and it's typical for a highway bridge program and HSIP and active transportation grants where they'll release the initial like concept and environmental review funds, and then their final design funds, right-of-way funds, and then they'll go and have the construction funding.
So all these are not intended to total across or anything. They're just showing different pots of money. That's what I'm trying to.
Yes, and this one, in this case, is just that we're receiving. So it's fantastic because we wouldn't, the numbers that are shown here, the $14 million, when we only have 3 to 4 million in streets capital every year, there's no way we could ever deliver these types of projects. So it is absolutely critical that we receive grant funding for transportation projects.
Well, the only comment I have is that it is so wonderful because I think the first one of these I saw, it was, these are all the projects we'd like to do, but we have no money, we have no money, we have no money. And then we got Measure C passed, and now, like, as you said, as you indicated, we're catching up. So the money really goes away fast, but it improved things significantly. And that's really my only comment. I see Hillary's here and Susan, so.
Yeah, I just want to, say, and it's exciting to, I've seen many of these too, and it's great to see things get finished. And yeah, for many years, it was a really, really, really long list. I mean, it still is, which is good because we're continually improving, but it was a really long list. But a lot of those things have either gotten done over the past few years or they're programmed for now, basically. And so, I say this every time, but you're all doing such a great job on the grants, and hopefully the ATP grants that were just submitted are successful, but it's a good you know, a good thing for the public to know, right? That after this round, you know, in the next round, after the census is totaled up, Santa Barbara is going to be a small fish in a big pond, and we're not going to be necessarily going to be the city that snatches up all the ATP dollars, you know, statewide. And so it's really good that we've gotten what we have, but that pot of money may dry up for us here in, you know, years. So it's great that we're doing these huge transformative projects now and getting them funded. So, you know, I'm scared about the future in that way, and I'm sure you all are too. So it's just really great that we're getting so much done, not just in the bike network, but all of our bridges and everything. So yeah, it's exciting to see. And, you know, obviously the economy is not doing super hot, but thank goodness for Measure C, and thank goodness for the voters for having the foresight to, you know, agree to that. And it will get better, of course, but it's nice to see that we have a little bit of money to spend to improve these things, and we're always going to need more, but it's nice to be able to take care of some of these transformative projects. So congratulations and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Susan, would you like to share something now?
Yeah, thanks. Jessica, that's the best presentation I've heard of this huge project and all the money that I've heard. Thank you so much.
I'll second that.
And the way you organized it was brilliant. So thank you. And, but the one thing that I'm worried about is what I read about the pandemic causing taxes to be so low because the revenue is not coming in, like from tourism and different things. I guess the utility tax will still be steady, but what is going to happen if the pandemic just dries up so much funds? What do you think? Or is that a worry?
Chair Rodriguez and Committee Member Horn. Yes, it was a worry. It's a worry for me and our group. But so far, our streets manager Jim Dewey, he's been closely monitoring it and looking at the sales tax revenues. One of the things that plays into our sales tax is also online shopping. So that has definitely picked up.
Oh, I didn't know. Wow.
Yes, and so we are not at this point in time anticipating a big hit to sales tax revenue.
Thank you.
Chair Rodriguez, I think you might be on mute, or we have a bad connection.
Oh, I'm using my husband's laptop. I had to unmute myself, and I don't do the fingers right. So I'll admit my computer illiteracy. Okay, well, do we have any public comment or at this point? I don't know if there's anyone signed up for that. There's Michelle.
Hi, Madam Chair. Yes, at this time, we have no members of the public attending, so no public comment.
Okay. Well, that simplifies our lives a little bit. It's always nice to get public comment, but I believe we can adjourn. What do you think? Is there anything else?
If there's no other comments on this one, we did have a couple of announcements that we can move into following this. And I think I can stop sharing my screen. On the agenda, there was just a couple of announcements. The first one being bike share for an update. And I think committee member David Collum said, "Oh, it'd be nice to have bike share," and it's coming. We had planned to release it back in May with B-Cycle being the provider, they are still on target to provide that service. With the pandemic, we had a little bit of a setback, but we were just at City Council this past Tuesday, just providing an update for the program and asking to move forward with temporary installations of some of the bike share docking stations along State Street, asking for direction to move forward with that. And then elsewhere, it's kind of State Street and then the waterfront are sort of the first phase, and then we'll the phases following once they're in, and B-Cycles testing everything out will follow then throughout the neighborhoods. We do have to get a coastal development permit for any dock locations in the coastal zone, so we're working on that application right now. But we should, by the next time, have a more updated timeline for launch. But we are working closely with them, identifying locations on State Street. Yes, did you have a question?
Susan, did you want to? Yeah, Susan, go ahead, Susan.
I just was interested in if you, like the last mile issue about people taking the train or the bus in different places and not having a way to get to the last mile to their workplace, for example, and how it would be so great, you know, if more people would use the train and the buses and all that. Are you planning with the bike share locations to make that like a lot of happening at the train and the bus and all that so that people can get to work?
Yes, Committee Member Horn. Yeah, they're in definite strategic. We're trying to have them in strategic locations to facilitate that, because that is the big point and draw for the public bike share system.
Oh, good. Thank you.
And then if there's no other questions, then I can go to the second announcement.
Go ahead.
And so the second announcement was last week, and I believe you both have received an email last week as well. It was for the Westside Paseos project. We went back to the residents just with a design update. It was over 2 nights. The first night was focusing on connections within the Westside neighborhood on Gillespie, San Pasqual, Mitchell, Torina, and Mission Streets. And then the second night was focused from getting from the West Side to downtown. This was a new format for us. Typically, we'd like to have open house formats, but because of the pandemic, we held a webinar. But it was great. We got a lot of great participation and great questions, both evenings. We're continuing to receive emails and phone calls about the project, and we are receiving just great insight from the residents that live there every day and can provide us as we move into design just with some added information and anecdotal information from their experiences as they drive, walk, and bike in the neighborhood. So we're going to be proceeding the next to design review. We don't have an exact date yet, and we're still receiving feedback. And so anybody that's, it's Westside Paseos, let's see, santabarbaraca.gov/Westside Paseos as the project website. And then there's also accompanying email for that. Ms. Buckerby, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to say that I attended both of those, and I want to commend you and Derek for doing such a great job. I think it's it's sort of a surprise to hear the rebranding, but I think it was so smart. And the way that it was presented and laid out, I think was very clear, at least the type of learner I am. I think it was very clear with the maps and the descriptions and the picture examples and the mock-ups. So I'd really recommend if you couldn't attend, I think there's a recording, right, of both of them. Is really, really great. And there was a lot of good interaction from the public on the chat and everything. So I was really impressed. It's not easy to do public meetings on this or to have some kind of workshop. So, but I think you did a really good job, and I think people will have a much better understanding of what this project will look like. And of course, they have changed over the years, right? You know, like Gillespie versus Chino and things like that. So I think it's really coming together nicely, and I just wanted to say, you know, really good job.
Thank you, Committee
Would
Member
you-
Leckerby.
Would you repeat that link for us to check it out?
Yes, and I can follow up with an email. I believe it's santabarbaraca.gov/Westside Community Paseos. And I will through Mindy. I'll send it out.
Send it out to the committee so that we can look at it. That would be helpful. I just have is it likely that we will not meet again until 2021?
That is correct. I think our next scheduled meeting would be in February of 2021. And unless there's something that comes up with a project that would warrant a special meeting. But right now, we don't have that. We have our hands full with just working on the capital program and our existing projects. They keep our hours very full every day.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And let's all get through the holidays safely and in small groups, I hope, very small groups. I think with that, we'll adjourn, and thank you all very much for your participation. Good night.